Hello, everyone. Let's get started with the highlights for today. First one is from Get It Done. In this famous scene, when Tom gets his friends to paint the fence for him by pretending it's a rare and pleasurable opportunity, Mark Twain offers an insight into the psychology of intrinsic motivation. He observes that work consists of whatever a body is obliged to do, and that play consists of whatever a body is not obliged to do. This is referring to that scene where Tom is kind of what I forget what exactly happened, but it's more about encouraging his friends to paint his fashion because it was so pleasurable, and yeah, I think it's pretty much given in the highlight. The motivation behind it. If somebody is obliged to do something, it is not play, that is work. But Tom, in this particular case, portrayed it as play, not work. It's something that it would be a privilege for them to do this, to paint his fence, not work. And then there were, there were many people lining up to paint his fence. So really, yeah, it's mirroring the motivation, the aspects of motivation over here, where the work that you're supposed to do, but if it's actually play for you, if you're actually having fun, there is intrinsic motivation and you're motivated to just get that work done, to achieve that whatever you have set out to achieve. You're highly motivated to complete that, rather than something that somebody's telling you to do. Yep, I think it's pretty much covered. There's not much else to say over here, so let's move on. Extreme ownership. If I express doubts or openly question the wisdom of this plan in front of the troops, their decision toward the mission would increase exponentially. They would never believe in it. As a result, they would never commit to it, and it would fail. But once I understood and believed, I then passed that understanding and belief on clearly and succinctly to my troops, so that they believed in it themselves. When they understood why, they would commit to the mission, persevere through the inevitable challenges in store, and accomplish the task set before us. So I think this highlight is pretty much extensive. Let me just scroll up so that you can see it. Yeah. So I think it's pretty much extensive. There's not much for me to say over here. I don't know if I completely agree, or at least I think that it's very difficult to achieve this in practice, because there is this kind of balance that you need to maintain um, between having this transparency with your team, with your group, where it's helpful actually to for them to know that you have considered different aspects of failure of that mission as well, and then you have addressed that. So that is what they need to know. And so it's tricky. It doesn't mean that this highlight is necessarily wrong. It's not. It just the tricky aspect is that figuring out how do you communicate this so that you convey that, okay, you have considered the different aspects of failure, you're inviting different inputs, that's it, you're not ruling that out, but you're portraying that you have already considered some aspects of failure, you've got that sorted out with the management and everything, and you're welcoming inputs, but otherwise you believe in this mission. So that's, yeah, I agree that it's important that you show that you believe in the mission, but you also show that you have considered different failure modes for this particular activity or mission, and you pass it on. So it's just that I think this highlight is valid. It's just that maybe it does not really explicitly show that how you're going to how are you going to portray that to your team. So yeah, that's the reservation. But otherwise, yes, there's nothing technically wrong. I mean, I fundamentally agree with this. It's just trickier than it seems. So yeah, with that, let's move on. Thanks for the feedback. After every low score you receive, after each failure and faltering step, give yourself a second score based on how you have handled the first one. In every situation in life, there's the situation itself, and then there's how you handle it. Even when you get an F for the situation itself, you still earn an A plus for how you deal with it. There are two pieces of good news here. First, while the initial evaluation may not be fully within your control, your reaction to it usually is. And second, in the long term, the second score is often more important than the first. Again, I think this is like an extensive highlight. It's pretty much clear what's what the author wants to say. So essentially, the idea is that you decouple the the score. Like if you're giving yourself score on your achievements, for example, or how you handle the situation, as in the situation in the first place, not how you have handled your reaction to the situation. So uh, even if you don't have the control on the first part of it, we often don't have control on the environment aspect, and what happens in larger complex systems, we don't really have control over a lot of it. So even though we don't have a lot of control, and things may not go our way, at least the reaction, maybe it could be how we intrinsically believe to pick ourselves up and move on, or a plan B sort of thing, for example. And that is usually the more important thing anyway. How you, because like they say, plans are useless, planning is everything. So um yeah, it's really, the first part is equivalent to the plan. We had set up the plan and it worked or it didn't work. But really, if you have prepared with your planning, uh, if you have done your planning well, you're able to pick yourself up and move on. And that's what uh, that's what planning is all about. That's what I think this highlight is trying to convey. But let's move on. Okay, this is so readwise, other than books, it also takes highlights of various articles. So this is an article, sorry, this is a highlight from a tool called doc query. So yeah, there's not much to say. You can read it on the screen, but again, there's not much to discuss here. Use possibility. Individuals focused on motion rather than impact struggle to discuss their failures in any meaningful way. They also can't talk about what they learned in concrete terms and tend to conflict success with more busyness. So I think this highlight pretty much covers. I don't really know what else I can talk about this. It's pretty clear, So when the author, when they're talking about motion, they're really talking about activity. So the activities that you do, they usually have an impact, and if you focus on the activity itself, not the impact, then the author's point over here is that you can't discuss your failures in any meaningful way. And really, it's just that because you've decoupled you're focused more on the activity, you've decoupled then the activity from the impact, and you're focusing more on your activity. You'll keep doing that, and you're not really focusing on the impact. The you're not tweaking your activity based on the impact, because your focus is on the activity itself. Whereas if your focus were on impact, you would tweak the activity to make it work. So let's move on. 4,000 weeks. The exhilaration that sometimes arises when you grasp this truth about finitude has been called the joy of missing out. By way of deliberate contrast with the idea of the fear of missing out, it is thrilling recognition that you wouldn't even really want to be able to do everything. Since if you didn't have to decide what to miss out on, choices couldn't truly mean anything. Um, this is really one of my favorite parts of the book, where the author is contrasting FOMO with something new called JOMO, joy of missing out. And the contrast, I think, is helpful. So we often talk about FOMO and everything, and we treat that as a thing. It has kind of become a thing. For example, we or at least I, we use it as a reason for doing something which really hurts you in the long run. For example, you may want to get involved with everything, because FOMO. Uh, and I know that I do that, and because there was nothing in my mind which was kind of um, on a parallel track to FOMO. Like FOMO was the only thing that I knew, and that was like the perfect excuse for me to keep doing what I was doing, and stick with the unhealthy practice of trying to get involved in everything. For example, but this particular aspect, and I started think of the other parallel of FOMO, like joy of missing out. that kind of clicked the behavior in me, that okay, there is another thing I can focus on rather than fear of missing out. It's like one of those things, where even if you're trying to avoid negative outcome, it is helpful to frame it in the terms of positive, in terms of what you want rather than what you don't want. I think it's very similar to that. So yeah, let's move on. The talent war. When a high potential candidate shows up and all you had is the adequate, that candidate will look very different. Different is misread as a red flag. So your high potential candidate's resume goes where? In the trash. So again, this is very much to do with bias. I think we have discussed this before, where a high potential candidate, the resume would look different from the regular. So if you're thinking of a bell curve of the applicants that you get, and most of them in a bell curve, you would see that the most of the people would be in the middle part of the bell curve. You would have very few who are at the extreme ends, who are low potential and high potential. So these low potential and high potential ones, the resumes would be different. One of the, I mean, apart from other things, one of the things that would be different is resume. And if different is misread as a red flag, that is, again, this is our bias at work. It's a very common thing that happens. We are kind of we stick with the familiar. We don't really consider that, or we don't really think. And first of all, it's not even about thinking. It's the awareness that we can carry this bias. And if you're not aware of that, you can very easily fall into the trap of, oh, this resume is different from the ones that we usually interview, because like usually is in the middle of the bell curve. So like the highlight says, that resume goes in trash. We don't even consider it. So yeah, something to be mindful about when hiring. Let's move on. 4,000 weeks again. When you can no longer turn back, anxiety falls away because now there's only one direction to travel forward into the consequences of your choice. So uh, I'm forgetting the context of turning back where, but I think it's obvious that the highlight is talking about turning back on your decision. And if you rule that out, that okay, there are certain situations where I can't turn back, and if I stop thinking about that, and the anxiety falls away, there's only one direction to travel. It's only keep moving forward. I really like. There is this movie. I don't know if it's. I think it's Disney. Meet the Robinsons, and there is this phrase coming up again and again. Keep moving forward, and I really like the movie for that phrase. So yeah, it's only one direction travel. Keep moving forward. Fix the decisions that you made. Do better next time. That's really about it. And if that's the attitude, anxiety falls away. It's not that magically things work out. It works out because you've stopped being anxious and now you're able to think of the situation in a better way. So let's move on. Again, get it done. The result of reactance is that you might act against your best interest because someone else is demanding that you do what's best for you. The goal is rejected only because it didn't come from within. This is talking about things when people tell us to do something which we know it's in our best interest, which we know that it's good for us, because somebody else has told us, even though it is in our best interest, the goal is kind of rejected. We internally don't like doing that. And I don't know about you, for example, but I've seen this happen in myself. If I would know that okay, there is something I need to do, but if somebody has told me to do that exact same thing, uh, I kind of, I mean, I'm thinking that yeah, this is something I still have to do, but that motivation is lost. And the drive I might have earlier had of doing something, but because now somebody else said that, I would still do that. It's not that okay, I would rebel against it. I would still do that, but um, I would lose that motivation. And that also tells me, the rebellious nature we see in some people when we tell them to do some things which are actually in their best interest. So it's really tricky thing to motivate somebody else. You really can't, and considering the different aspects of psychological science, um, it's one of this is one of the most difficult things. How do you motivate somebody? It's pretty much impossible. You don't motivate somebody by telling them what's in their best interest. But I mean, again, I'm digressing, so I won't really go into that. So yeah, the The fundamental nature of this, what this highlight is trying to say, the goal is rejected only because it doesn't come from within. It's coming from outside, and even though you know, you're aware that this is in your best interest, you're rejecting it. Let's move on. Sophie's world. Okay, it's I didn't highlight this, but Aristotle held that there are three forms of happiness. The first form of happiness is a life of pleasure and enjoyment. The second form of happiness is a life as a free and responsible citizen. The third form of happiness is a life as thinker and philosopher. Uh, Okay, it's been a while since I read this, so I don't really remember the context. But again, I think this highlight pretty much covers the whole aspect of what it wants to say. Of course, the context will add more, but like what exactly is happening to Sophie and which story she is in at that particular moment. But yeah, I think that's really it. This is the bonus. Disrupt yourself. Again, I've not read this, so I don't know. I've read another book from Whitney Johnson though, but I can't remember this one. So yeah, there's no point. I think I'm going to call it a day today. And once again, thank you for watching and have a good day.